Alright guys, Jameson and Alex here. Today we're going to be going over the recently released adventure book, the Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep.
Yes.
So our thoughts on it, some of the cool features that we think are very interesting that could be used whether or not you get the book, if you should get the book, if you shouldn't get the book, stuff like that. All that being said, D&D Beyond Players Bundle giveaway.
Ooh, free
Make sure
stuff.
you like, comment, and subscribe to be entered in that. And of course, check out our sponsors, Hit Point Press and their Big Bads series. They're doing bundles of groups of their Big Bads. If you want to get a bunch of them at one time, check out their bundles.
Cheaper
Some
that
cool
way,
stuff.
bundle pricing and whatnot.
There you go. So check them out. But yeah, we'll just jump straight into it, guys. On here, we have Call of the Netherdeep.
And I think, as with any kind of adventure-based book, we're not going to touch any of the contents in the story-based thing and not give away spoilers of the story that are in there. Looking more at the specific features and things that are in this book. The number one unique thing that appears in this book first that catches both of our attention is the rivals mechanic. And it kind of stresses out and gives a sample, essentially, of a rival group of members that your party could encounter early on, and if you play through this adventure, will encounter early on. So I guess small spoiler there. If you use the specific ones, but you don't have to use the specific ones listed there.
Right.
And then the mechanics listed are based on your interactions with them and other actions you do around them may or may not affect your relationship with them.
Exactly.
Because you kind of start off as indifferent, you can acknowledge, you see each other, acknowledge each other, but whether you kind of become friendly rivals or not so friendly rivals will depend on how you handle things. And that mechanic is very, very nifty because they will grow and develop like you do.
Exactly.
And create some very interesting, recurring side story bits.
Yes. And I think one of the things, this isn't really a spoiler. We're going to avoid spoilers as much as possible, but to touch on some of the highlights, it's going to be hard to be completely spoiler-free. If anything, it's going to be very mild. We're not going to tell you, you're going to go to this place and do this thing, but we might say there's some mechanics that are interesting that deal with X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
So that being said, the rivals being very interesting, as Alex said, they do scale with you, and it gives tips for the DM on how to maybe have relationships with the players, as in, like he said, depending on your actions, will perceive how they react to you. So if you go and kill one of their members, guess what? They're probably not going to be super fond of that, and they'll probably try to kill you too.
Yep.
But if you help them out, maybe they're in trouble, and you try to save one of them or something.
Yep.
Maybe you'll be kind of like some
Return the favor down the road kind of thing. Yeah.
So it's very interesting with that, and then also they have scaling stat blocks. So as the adventure goes on, and you maybe keep bumping into them here and there, potentially, depends on again how you interact with them.
Yep.
But if you do bump into them later on, then they're going to be stronger as you're getting stronger.
Right.
And one of the interesting things that they put in here that Matt wrote is basically that your players, you as a player, if you're a player, you're always the hero of the story, right? Mm-hmm. And with the rivals, in their mind as NPCs, they're the heroes of the story.
Right.
So depending on how you interact, they could be step up on you, or you could be a step up on them, and it could be like Alex said, a friendly rivalry where you're both trying to get to this end goal and be the real heroes of the story.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting that you're trying to almost compete to have the story be centered around you versus you could be like the NPCs essentially.
Yeah, because if you take too long to solve said puzzle, or you don't get the information out of the correct person fast enough, they might beat you to the end goal for this little chapter or something. Yeah.
And another thing too, with no spoilers again, the ending has multiple different endings depending on what you do.
Right.
So if you decide to go a certain route, you're going to get a certain ending, but you could go a very different route and get a completely different ending depending on which way you go, which that is very interesting. We don't really see that a whole lot in these adventure books.
Yep.
So that I am a big fan of as well as a DM. So it gives you some lenience. There's when it comes to the actual story on here, there are 7 chapters on here. It starts at level 3, and I believe it ends at level 12. I think when you complete the last chapter, you level up to 13, but this campaign's over at that point, so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Unless you decide to continue the story on. And that's another side point I wanted to make, is the recently released Wildmount book.
Yep.
You very well could continue the story on from level 13 and go all the way to 20 if you wanted to, because you have the full world setting if you also want to incorporate it into the Wildmount
Sure.
area, which this book does really start off in Zorhas. So you're gonna. That's another thing that's really interesting is if you're used to typical, elves, humans, dwarves kind of area.
Yep.
This story starts off in Zorhas, which if you're not familiar with Critical Role, is all of the more monstrous races are normal. So if you're a human or an elf or a dwarf, you're an outsider.
Yeah.
To them, so you'd be the one with the hood up, trying to keep it low profile, and which is really interesting to kind of flip the tables on there as well, which can be fun as a player and a DM. Just kind of do a complete opposite of normal.
Instead of humans, dwarves, elves, halflings everywhere, you're used to seeing that it's
lizard folk,
bugbears and
weird, orcs, hobgoblins, goblins, weird monstrous races on there. So that's always fun to do.
Next thing up, I guess, is I would say the fragments.
Yes. Again, it's hard to
I made an awful announcement up front of it. We're not going to spoil anything, but
we're tiptoeing.
We're totally going to tiptoe on the mild. We're all over the mild spoiler thing.
It's kind of to do with unique magic items. One of the things I want to say too with this is we're looking at this as, yes, it is an adventure, but there's tools and things that can be used from this adventure.
Can be used
anywhere else. So even if you didn't want to do it necessarily in this setting, you can get some really cool, interesting ideas from the things that are done in this book.
These things, as primarily a player who is DMs on occasion, the player side of me is terrified of these things. It's absolutely terrifying.
And again, we're not going to say how you get them or why you get them, or if you even have to or don't have to or any of that. We're just going to go over what's interesting about them.
When it comes to me personally and my luck when it comes to things like this, if you're weighing good and bad chances, if the good is ahead of the bad 2-1, the bad's still going to happen. That's just fair. Me. So that's what kind of gives you a suggestion of what's going to happen here. So with these fragments of suffering, there are a handful of them, but what makes them specific, like I said, is they have both a benefit and a drawback. So if you're getting both, it's not of if and or the other. And I don't want to spoil all of them, but kind of give you. We'll grab a couple of them out of here. How about Fragment of Pity? The benefit is each time you spend a hit die to regain hit points, you regain additional hit points equal to your proficiency bonus.
All right.
Drawback. You have disadvantage on death saving throws.
Oh, boy.
So it's you better hope that benefit's keeping you alive, because if you go down, fart.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
So again,
you get extra health when you're feeling good, and you get extra bad when you're feeling bad.
The highest AC in the party, has been unconscious the most amount of times in the party.
Sometimes it's like that.
Yeah. So that terrifies me.
Yes. So
which one would you like to throw out of there?
Let's see here.
I threw the most dire straits one.
Fragment of Rancor. Benefit. When you hit a creature with an attack, you can choose to deal either an extra 2d6 psychic damage to the creature or 4d6 psychic damage to each other creature within 5 feet of it. After you use the benefit, you must finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. So just an extra bonus bump damage on here. But the drawback is whenever you are not unconscious and fail a saving throw, you take 2d6 psychic damage. So you're dealing extra damage, but you're also taking extra damage in certain circumstances.
Yep.
So,
There's a total of 9 of these in the book. But again, like Jameson said, and we hit all the stuff, you can take these and run with these anywhere. But to me, it also gives you the idea, if you're creative enough, you can make countless versions of this.
Yes, for sure.
On your own. This kind of just, when they put stuff like this in the book, it kind of gives you a legal framework to build items like this. Exactly. And it kind of be, even if it's not one that's in a book somewhere, something exactly the same is in a book somewhere. And then it's just a question of whether it's balanced or not. But we can make cases to whether Wizards has the stuff that it's in their official books balanced or not, based on our subclass review videos and nothing else.
Yes. I think one other thing that, along with this whole theme of magic items and things, right at the beginning of the story, no spoilers again because it's the very beginning of the story, you're at a festival essentially, and depending on, there's different games and stuff you can play and all that stuff, and some of the prizes you can get are these different medals, medals of merit, and basically what these are their one-time use magic items. Mm-hmm. So it can give you a bonus, for example, Medal of Muscle. You squeeze this medal tightly in your palm as an action, gives you advantage on strength checks and saving throws for an hour. Once it's used, can't be used again. So I like these as a DM because you can say, here you go, players. You can get this special benefit. It's up to you to decide when you use it.
And I hate that. Because as soon as I use it, the better opportunity comes up literally the next day.
Exactly. So it's really fun as players to say, like, oh, do I really want to burn this right now?
Yep.
Am I going to get a better chance or not?
And DMs love violating your 8th Amendment right to cruel and unusual punishment.
Yes. I love to make the players squirm and try to think about, like, is this the right time to do it or not?
Yeah. Opportunity cost and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I love that as a DM. And there's several of those as well. So it's just an example of the kind of magic items. So very unique stuff on there that I'm a big fan of as a DM. All that being said, I always do custom homebrew stories just because I like to have more freeform when I'm DMing. So adventures in general, I steer away from for the most part.
Yep.
But with these kind of books where they have these kind of systems and stuff like that, I will oftentimes cherry pick either certain chapters, maybe certain adventure hooks or ideas from different chapters and adapt them to my world or the character's level, because our main party are all over. We're already above this level cap on here. Right. So if I wanted to adapt some of this into our campaign, for example, I'd have to rescale up all of the challenge ratings for stuff to make it fit. But I can get some really interesting ideas from this kind of stuff. And one other thing that I want to mention that is really interesting on here that you don't see much of is in the beginning introduction chapter on here, it has a little recap of underwater adventuring, which gives you a little bit of some interesting concepts on here for visibility underwater, swim speed underwater, underwater encounter distance, water pressure. So
it gets a lot more specific with details and things in there.
So there's some really cool, unique stuff that you can throw in there that's going to make typical combat more complex and interesting.
Yep.
So I'm a big fan of that as well. Just trying to mix up where you could have a whole, section of a campaign or whatever in a completely different environment that makes the players think completely outside of normal realm.
Yep.
So that is a big fan of that as well. So some really interesting stuff on here. The story is mostly linear from a DM standpoint. There are a few sections, from my understanding, that are more sandboxy, let the players explore a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it is an adventure book. So there is a beginning and an end.
Yep.
If you're a creative DM, you can kind of toe that line a little bit and throw in some custom stuff. But it's definitely very interesting, and I'm a big fan of all of the new, unique, different things that are thrown into this book.
And the other thing, just in general with adventure books, if you guys haven't seen us review any other adventure books in the past, that adventure books to us are a great way if you're scared of DMing. It's a good place to start, because that way you kind of, the main framework, you kind of learn the process of what it's like to, guide a group through a story with, and you've got a smaller tunnel instead of this guy first. You're thinking a DM is like, let's go. It's just open.
Let's go.
And we're going everywhere and always.
Here's 17 side quests.
Yeah, we're going to do this. And all the time, nothing makes me go more when he says, just remember, if you're going to be spending all your time doing this, something else is going to be happening over here. It's like, wait, no! And it terrifies me. It's like, we're over here trying to save this town over here. This one's falling into a big pit of acid. And nothing we can do about it.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's it goes to the concept, like Jameson says, of player agency is the fun little term that likes to get thrown around in the gaming world. Anything that lets your players make choices that seem impactful, whether it's using magic items and then when using their resources like they have, is what makes the process fun as a DM and challenging as a player in the best ways.
Absolutely.
And this gives you plenty of opportunities to do so.
Yeah, and I think the rival system, again, is a great way to have agency for the players. Yeah. So you're like, you can take a short rest if you want, but you might fall behind.
But old boy is like, he doing this too. Like, come on, let's go.
I think that's a really interesting way, because a lot of newer DMs, I think, struggle with that, where it's like the players try to take short rests all the time or long rests, and they forget we can only do a long rest every 24 hours.
Yeah.
They'll forget that, and the players try to board up in a room or something and take a long rest or short rest.
Yeah.
And it's like learning how to put a little fire under the players and give them a reason to not just take everything
take
so
their
slow
sweet time.
is really important. And this book, I think, will teach a lot of newer DMs a good way to do that, which I think is actually really helpful.
A free built-in mechanic without having to like create a way to light that fire. It's right there handy for you.
So yeah, big fans of this. I love a lot of the stuff that's coming here recently from Critical Role team with their new Teledora Reborn book, which unofficial, and then this official adventure book. I think we're going to see a lot more from them, to be fair.
I just can't imagine why.
Yeah, right? It's like almost like all the stuff sells really well.
Yeah.
But that'll be it, I think, for today, guys. Really interesting, fun book. Worth a look at the very least. And hey, if you already got Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, why not tack on some more potential adventures and plot hooks on there, too.
Yep.
So thanks again to our sponsors, Hit Point Press. Make sure you check out their Big Bad series, their bundles, all that fun stuff. Always bringing new stuff to you guys, so keep checking them out. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.